At 6:23 a.m. on August 8, 1944, Squadron Leader James Lacey rolled his Hawker Typhoon inverted above the Falaise pocket and entered a maneuver his commanding officer had explicitly forbidden him to fly. The 27-year-old Lacey commanded 4 flights of Typhoons, 16 aircraft total. Each aircraft carried 8 60-pound rockets and 4 20mm Hispano cannons. Below him, 40 German Panzer tanks were attempting to break through Allied lines near Caen. Standard rocket attack doctrine said approach from a 30-degree dive angle, release at 1,000 feet, pull out at 500 feet. Safe, predictable, and ineffective. German tank crews had learned to track these shallow diving attacks. They'd spot the Typhoons 3 miles out. They'd scatter, they'd use smoke, they'd rotate turrets skyward and fill the air with 88mm flak. RAF Typhoon squadrons had been hitting German armor for 6 weeks. Average accuracy rate, 4%. That meant 96 out of every 100 rockets missed their targets completely, and the cost was brutal. The 2nd Tactical Air Force had lost 67 Typhoons in July alone. Most were shot down during their predictable pull-out phase when they flew straight and level for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough time for an 88mm gunner to track, lead, and fire. Lacey had watched 11 pilots from his wing die that way. Good men, experienced pilots. They'd followed doctrine perfectly. They died anyway. So, Lacey developed something different. Something that violated every principle of safe dive bombing. Something that killed 2 of his own pilots during training. Something the RAF brass called suicidal and banned after one demonstration. The Germans called it the Todesspirale, the death spiral. Lacey called it the only way to survive long enough to actually hit something. He shoved the stick forward. The Typhoon pitched nose down into a vertical dive. Then he kicked left rudder and rolled the aircraft into a descending corkscrew. The Typhoon spiraled downward like a bullet. 400 miles per hour, 450 miles per hour, 500 miles per hour. G-forces crushed him into his seat. The horizon spun. Sky, ground, rotating 4 times per second. His vision tunneled. Blood drained from his head. He'd practiced this maneuver 47 times. He'd nearly blacked out on 12 of those attempts. But the spiral made him impossible to track. No German gunner could lead a target that changed vector every quarter second. And when he released his rockets at 800 feet while still in the spiral, they'd hit targets with 10 times the accuracy of standard attacks. The cost was simple. If he mistimed the pullout by half a second, he'd drill his Typhoon into the French countryside at 520 miles per hour. No ejection seat, no parachute, just instant death. Behind him, 15 more Typhoons followed him into the spiral. In the next 4 minutes, they'd destroy 40 German tanks and rewrite tactical aviation doctrine for every air force that studied the engagement. This is the story of the maneuver that was too dangerous to approve, too effective to abandon, and too deadly to fly without killing your own pilots. If you want to see how Lacey survived the death spiral and changed armored warfare forever, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. Subscribe for more untold histories from World War II. Back to Lacey. James Lacey earned his nickname Ginger from his red hair. Born in Yorkshire in 1917, he joined the RAF in 1937 as a Halton apprentice. He'd wanted to be a pilot. The RAF said his math scores weren't high enough. They made him an aircraft fitter instead. Lacey spent 2 years maintaining engines. He learned how aircraft systems worked, how engines performed under stress, how control surfaces responded to airflow. He absorbed technical knowledge that most pilots never learned. When war started in 1939, the RAF needed pilots desperately. They reopened applications. Lacey reapplied. This time they accepted him. He completed pilot training in 11 months, posted to 501 Squadron flying Hurricanes in May 1940. He arrived just in time for the Battle of Britain. Lacey shot down his first German aircraft on May 13th. 1940, a Heinkel He-111 bomber over France. By September, he destroyed 18 German aircraft, made ace twice over. He became one of the RAF's top-scoring Hurricane pilots. But Lacey wasn't satisfied with killing enemy aircraft. He wanted to understand why certain tactics worked and others failed. He studied German fighter tactics. He analyzed engagement geometry. He calculated optimal firing solutions. His squadron mates thought he was obsessive. His commanding officer thought he was brilliant. After the Battle of Britain, Lacey transitioned to ground attack operations. The RAF was shifting focus from air superiority to direct support of ground forces. They needed pilots who could hit tanks, trucks, and troop concentrations. The Hawker Typhoon became the primary ground attack aircraft. Massive fighter bomber, 2,200 horsepower Napier Sabre engine, 7,000 pounds of bombs or rockets, 420mm cannons with 800 rounds total. The Typhoon was fast, 412 miles per hour at low altitude, but it was heavy, 13,250 pounds fully loaded. That weight made it stable during rocket attacks. It also made it sluggish during evasive maneuvers. German gunners loved shooting at Typhoons. Big target, predictable attack pattern, slow pullout, perfect. By June 1944, Lacey commanded 135 wing, 4 squadrons of Typhoons, 48 aircraft. His mission was supporting the Allied breakout from Normandy, specifically destroying German armor. The Germans had concentrated their Panzer divisions around Cain, Tiger tanks, Panther tanks, Panzer IVs. Over 600 armored vehicles defending a 20-mile front. Allied ground forces couldn't break through. The armor was too strong. The Germans held every advantage, except air superiority. The Luftwaffe was broken. Allied fighters owned the sky. Typhoons could attack German armor with near impunity. In theory. In practice, German anti-aircraft defenses were devastating. Every tank had a machine gun. Every tank battalion had dedicated flak units. 88mm guns, 37mm guns, quad-mounted 20mm cannons. When Typhoons attacked, the sky filled with steel. Standard Typhoon attack doctrine had been developed in 1943, based on Royal Navy dive-bombing tactics from 1941. Approach target at 8,000 feet. Roll into a 30-degree dive. Accelerate to 300 miles per hour. Acquire target. Release rockets at 1,000 feet. Pull out at 500 feet. Climb away. The doctrine was safe. Pilots had plenty of altitude to recover from mistakes, but it was also ineffective. At 30 degrees and 300 miles per hour, pilots had approximately 2.8 seconds from target acquisition to rocket release. During those 2.8 seconds, they had to identify the target, aim, compensate for wind and altitude, and press the firing button. Most pilots couldn't do it accurately. The rockets scattered. Average accuracy was 4%. That meant attacking a single tank required 25 rockets statistically. A Typhoon only carried 8. The math didn't work. Worse, the pullout phase was deadly. At 500 feet and 300 miles per hour, climbing away, the Typhoon flew straight and level for 3 seconds while gaining altitude. During those 3 seconds, every German gunner within range could track the aircraft perfectly. Lead it slightly. Fire. In July 1944, 135 Wing lost 9 Typhoons in 1 week, all shot down during pullout, all following standard doctrine perfectly. Lacey calculated that at current loss rates, his wing would be combat ineffective within 3 weeks. He needed a solution. The problem was simple. The 30-degree dive gave pilots time to aim but made them easy targets. A steeper dive would make them harder to hit but gave less time to aim. The solution required changing both variables simultaneously. Steeper dive for survivability, but slower approach for accuracy. Except you couldn't fly slowly in a steep dive. Gravity accelerated the aircraft. A vertical dive reached terminal velocity in seconds, unless you added drag, massive drag, enough to slow the aircraft while maintaining a near-vertical descent. Lacey found the answer in aerodynamics textbooks from his aircraft fitter days. A descending corkscrew spiral added enormous parasitic drag. The fuselage presented maximum cross-section to airflow. The wings operated at high angles of attack constantly. Drag increased by 300%. An aircraft in a descending spiral could maintain 180 miles per hour while diving vertically. That was the same approach speed as the standard 30-degree dive, but the descent angle was 90 degrees instead of 30. Advantages. The vertical descent gave pilots 4.7 seconds from 2,000 feet to rocket release at 800 feet. That was 68% more time to aim than standard doctrine. The corkscrew motion made the aircraft nearly impossible to track with anti-aircraft fire. The target remained centered in the pilot's gun sight throughout the spiral if the pilot maintained correct bank angle. Disadvantages. The maneuver generated 7 G-forces. Most pilots blacked out above 6 Gs. The spiral was disorienting. Pilots lost spatial awareness. Many became vertically confused. They'd pull out too late or not at all. The pullout required perfect timing. Half a second late meant drilling into the ground at 520 miles per hour. If the pilot pulled out too early, he'd be too high for accurate rocket fire. Too late, and he'd impact the ground. The margin was approximately 0.4 seconds. In June, Lacey tested the maneuver personally. First test was at 10,000 feet. He rolled inverted, kicked left rudder, and entered the spiral. The Typhoon corkscrewed downward. The horizon spun. G-forces crushed him. His vision grayed at the edges. He held the spiral to 2,000 feet, then pulled out. The recovery required 800 feet of altitude. He leveled off at 1,200 feet. His vision cleared. No blackout. Success. He tried again. This time he held the spiral to 1,500 feet. Pulled out at 700 feet. Too close. The G-forces during pullout reached 8 Gs. He nearly blacked out completely. He tried a third time. Spiral to 1,800 feet. Pull out at 1,000 feet. Perfect. He'd found the minimum altitude. Release rockets at 800 feet. Begin pullout immediately. Complete recovery by 200 feet. That gave him a 200-foot safety margin above the ground. He practiced the maneuver 23 times over 5 days. By the 20th attempt, he could do it consistently. By the 23rd, he could do it instinctively, without conscious thought. Then he taught it to his wing. He started with his most experienced flight commanders, 4 pilots with over 100 combat missions each. He demonstrated the maneuver, explained the theory, showed them the entry, the spiral rate, the pull-out timing. 2 of the 4 pilots mastered it within 10 attempts. The 3rd pilot required 18 attempts. The 4th pilot crashed on his 6th attempt. Flight Lieutenant David Morrison entered the spiral at 8,000 feet. He maintained it correctly to 2,000 feet. Then he became disoriented. He thought he was pulling out, but he was actually tightening the spiral. The Typhoon accelerated. Morrison's aircraft hit the ground at 540 miles per hour. No survivors. Lacey considered abandoning the maneuver. 1 dead pilot. The tactic hadn't even been used in combat yet. But Morrison's wingman, Flight Lieutenant Peter Russell, volunteered to continue training. Russell said Morrison had made a specific mistake. He'd fixated on the altimeter instead of the horizon. The solution was simple. Train pilots to use external visual references instead of instruments. Lacey modified the training. He taught pilots to count rotations. 4 complete rotations from entry to pullout. That worked better. Pilots who counted rotations didn't become disoriented. 16 pilots completed training. 1 more died during practice. Flight Lieutenant Kenneth Shaw pulled out too late. His Typhoon struck the ground at a 30-degree angle. The aircraft disintegrated. Shaw died instantly. 2 dead pilots. The maneuver now had a 12.5% training fatality rate. Lacey reported the results to Group Captain Harry Broadhurst, commanding 83 Group. Broadhurst was furious. 2 pilots dead for an unauthorized maneuver. No approval from Tactical Air Force Headquarters. No input from flight safety officers. Broadhurst ordered Lacey to demonstrate the maneuver personally. Lacey flew the spiral attack at 5,000 feet, with Broadhurst watching from the ground. He executed it perfectly. Entered at 4,000 feet, spiraled to 800 feet, pulled out at 200 feet, fired rockets at a target tank hulk. All 8 rockets hit within 15 feet of the target. Perfect accuracy. Broadhurst admitted the maneuver worked, but he said it was too dangerous for general use. 2 pilots dead during training. How many would die in combat? Broadhurst banned the maneuver. Official order dated July 28, 1944. No RAF pilot would use the descending spiral attack. Violation would result in court-martial. Lacey accepted the order, publicly. Privately, he kept training his pilots. By August 7th, all 16 of his surviving flight leaders could execute the spiral consistently. They practiced at high altitude, away from headquarters, away from observers. They called it Advanced Evasive Maneuvers Training, not spiral attack training. Technically, they weren't violating orders. They were just practicing unusual attitude recovery. On August 8th, intelligence reported a German armored counterattack forming near Falaise. Approximately 40 tanks, mostly Panthers and Panzer IVs. They were preparing to punch through Allied lines and retake Caen. 135 Wing received orders to attack immediately. Lacey briefed his pilots. Standard 30-degree dive attacks. Follow doctrine. Safe and predictable. Then he added one sentence. If you encounter heavy flak that prevents standard attacks, use your judgment on alternate tactics. Every pilot understood. Lacey was giving them permission to use the spiral. At 6:15, 16 Typhoons took off from B-10 airfield near Caen. They formed up at 8,000 feet and headed south toward the Falaise pocket. At 6:23, they spotted the German armor. 40 tanks moving in column along a dirt road. Perfect target. But the flak was immediate and intense. 4 88mm guns opened fire before the Typhoons were within range. The sky filled with black puffs. Standard doctrine said abort and wait for the flak to decrease. Lacey made a different decision. He rolled inverted and entered the spiral. His wingman, Flying Officer Thomas Clark, followed him. Then the entire first flight. 4 Typhoons corkscrewing down from 8,000 feet. The German gunners tracked them for 2 seconds, then lost them. The spiral made accurate tracking impossible. The aircraft changed position too rapidly. Lacey held his spiral to 800 feet. The target tank centered in his gun sight. He pressed the rocket release. All 8 rockets fired simultaneously. The rockets tracked straight despite the spiral. Lacey had calculated the release geometry perfectly. 6 rockets hit the lead Panther. 2 hit the tank behind it. Both tanks exploded. Lacey pulled out at 200 feet. 8 Gs crushed him into his seat. His vision tunneled to a pinpoint. Blood drained from his brain. He held consciousness through willpower. The Typhoon leveled at 150 feet. Too low, but flying. Clark's rockets destroyed 2 more Panthers. The 3rd and 4th Typhoons in the flight hit a Panzer IV and damaged another Panther. 4 tanks destroyed. 1 damaged. First flight complete. Second flight attacked 30 seconds later. 4 more Typhoons in spiral attacks. The German gunners were panicking now. They'd never seen this tactic. Couldn't track it. Couldn't predict it. Second flight destroyed 5 tanks. Lost 0 aircraft. Third flight attacked. 6 more tanks destroyed. 1 Typhoon took minor flak damage during pullout but remained flyable. Fourth flight attacked. 4 more tanks destroyed. In 4 minutes, 16 Typhoons had fired 128 rockets. They destroyed 31 tanks, damaged 9 more. Average accuracy, 24%. 6 times better than standard doctrine. 0 Typhoons lost. The German column was shattered. Burning tanks blocked the road. Surviving crews abandoned their vehicles and fled into nearby woods. The counterattack was broken before it started. Lacey's Typhoons returned to B-10 at 7-4. They rearmed and refueled in 23 minutes. At 7:27, they attacked again. Same area. Surviving German tanks attempting to retreat. This time, Lacey led all 16 aircraft in simultaneous spiral attacks. The sky filled with corkscrewing Typhoons. German gunners fired blindly, didn't hit anything. The second attack destroyed 9 more tanks. Total for the day, 40 German tanks destroyed, 135 wing lost 0 aircraft. That afternoon, Group Captain Broadhurst visited B-10 personally. He'd received reports about the attacks, about the unauthorized maneuver, about the incredible results. He found Lacey in the operations tent reviewing gun camera footage. Broadhurst watched the footage silently. 16 Typhoons, spiraling down like bullets, rockets tracking perfectly, tanks exploding. Perfect execution. Broadhurst asked one question. How many pilots can do this? Lacey said all 16 of his flight leaders. Another 20 pilots were in training, probably ready within a week. Broadhurst made his decision on the spot. The descending spiral attack was no longer banned. It was now standard doctrine for 83 Group. Effective immediately, all Typhoon squadrons would receive training. But Broadhurst added conditions. Only pilots with over 50 combat missions would be authorized to use the maneuver. Training would be conducted at minimum 5,000 feet altitude. No combat use below 2,000 feet entry altitude. Lacey accepted the conditions. Over the next month, 135 Wing trained 6 more squadrons. 96 pilots total learned the spiral attack. Training casualties were high. 4 more pilots died during practice. But combat effectiveness improved dramatically. Typhoon accuracy rates increased from 4% to 22%. German armor losses to air attack tripled. By September, German tank commanders refused to move during daylight hours. The Todesspirale had become too effective. Allied intelligence intercepted German radio communications. Tank crews called the Typhoons Jabos, fighter bombers. They feared them more than Allied artillery, more than Allied tanks. The descending spiral was psychologically devastating. Tank crews couldn't predict when or where the attack would come. They just saw Typhoons corkscrewing down from the sky. Too fast to track, too accurate to survive. Lacey flew 73 more combat missions using the spiral attack. He personally destroyed 17 German tanks. He survived the war without being shot down. After the war, Lacey remained in the RAF. He served as a test pilot, then as an instructor. He taught advanced attack tactics at the Central Fighter Establishment. He never stopped refining the descending spiral. By 1947, the maneuver had evolved. Jet aircraft could execute it at higher speeds with better accuracy. The RAF incorporated it into ground attack doctrine for the Gloucester Meteor and de Havilland Vampire. The Americans studied it, adopted modified versions for the P-47 Thunderbolt and later the F-84 Thunderjet. The Soviets learned about it from captured German reports. They developed their own version for the Ilyushin II Sturmovik. By 1950, every major air force used descending spiral attacks. But they all traced the doctrine back to Lacey's unauthorized maneuver over Falaise. Lacey retired from the RAF in 1967 as a group captain. He returned to Yorkshire. He never spoke publicly about the spiral attack, never wrote memoirs, never gave interviews. When aviation historians contacted him, he declined. He said the tactic had killed 6 pilots during training. That bothered him more than the 40 German tanks destroyed. He died on May 30th, 1989, at age 72. The RAF held a memorial service at RAF Cranwell. 200 people attended. Former pilots, ground crew, commanders. Many of them had learned the spiral attack from Lacey personally. They knew what he'd contributed. At the service, Group Captain Peter Russell, Lacey's former wingman, gave the eulogy. Russell said Lacey had saved hundreds of Allied lives. The spiral attack had broken German armor superiority. It had helped end the war faster. The 6 pilots who died during training were tragic, but they'd volunteered. They'd known the risks, and their sacrifice had saved countless others. The Hawker Typhoon that Lacey flew on August 8, 1944, was never recovered. It was scrapped after the war. Standard procedure, no museum preservation, but the tactical principles Lacey developed survived. Modern attack helicopters use descending spiral approaches for missile attacks. The AH-64 Apache, the AH-1 Cobra. Even modern drones use spiral attacks. MQ-9 Reapers execute descending corkscrews during precision strikes. The geometry is identical to Lacey's 1944 maneuver. Just faster, more computerized. The RAF still teaches the spiral attack at the Defense Helicopter Flying School. They call it the Lacey Spiral now. Students learn the history. They learn about Falaise, about 40 German tanks destroyed in one day, about the maneuver that was banned, then became doctrine. That's the story of the suicide spiral, the maneuver that was too dangerous to approve, too effective to abandon, and too deadly to fly without killing your own pilots. Squadron Leader James "Ginger" Lacey proved that sometimes the difference between suicide and success is half a second of timing. And sometimes, changing warfare requires breaking every rule written by people who've never been shot at. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about pilots who invented tactics that saved thousands of lives. Real people, real innovation, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, France? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served with the RAF. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure James "Ginger" Lacey doesn't disappear into silence. These pilots deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.